My name is Amanda Matthews, and last week, in a courtroom packed with lawyers, I slid Exhibit D across the table, the document that proved my mother had forged my signature to seize my inheritance. The look on her face when the judge demanded security escort her out. It was the first time I'd ever seen her speechless. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Because if you've ever been betrayed by someone who raised you, I want to know I'm not the only one. It was a Tuesday morning in downtown Phoenix, inside a polished, too-cold conference room that smelled faintly of printer ink and betrayal. The kind of place where family goes to die politely. I was seated between two attorneys in navy suits, expecting a routine meeting about my grandmother's estate. Instead, my mother leaned forward and said, in the same voice she once used to remind me to finish my broccoli, "Amanda, your father and I have filed for conservatorship. We believe you're emotionally unfit to manage your finances." I blinked. Once, twice. The words didn't land at first. My mouth opened but no sound came out. "Excuse me," I finally choked. Across from me, my father, Daniel Matthews, a man who once taught me to ride a bike and picked me up sobbing from my first breakup, was sitting back in his chair like he was watching a business presentation. He didn't even flinch. "You've been erratic since your grandmother passed," he said flatly, as if reading from a script. "The accounts are unstable. We think it's best for the family if we manage things for a while." "This isn't about love, Amanda," my mother added, adjusting her cashmere shawl like a villain in a courtroom drama. "It's about what's best for the family." That word, family, had never sounded so weaponized. I stood slowly, my palms slick with sweat but my spine steel straight. "You're trying to take control of everything Nana left me." "It's not about taking," my mother said, her smile tight. "It's about protecting." My father's lips twitched into something close to a smirk. "You've never made responsible choices, Amanda. This time we'll make them for you." That's when I realized this wasn't a spontaneous intervention. This was an ambush, neatly timed, legally prepared, and coldly executed. My attorney, Mr. Perkins, cleared his throat. "Amanda will review this filing in detail," but I was already walking. No, storming. My heels echoed down the hall as I left the glass-and-gold conference room behind. I didn't know where I was going, only that if I stayed 1 second longer, I'd either burst into tears or scream. Out in the hallway, I stopped in front of the elevators and pressed the down button hard enough to bruise. The sterile beige carpet swayed beneath me like I was on a ship mid-storm. I should have seen it coming. The subtle power plays, the patronizing comments, the way they kept offering help with the estate but wouldn't give me space to breathe. But this was war. As the elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, a single thought lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. My parents hadn't just betrayed me, they were trying to erase me, and I wasn't going to let them. 2 months earlier, in the same Arizona living room where we'd once decorated gingerbread houses and argued over board games, my mother had poured me a cup of tea and said, "You're not alone in this." The afternoon sun poured in through the tall windows, soft and warm against the beige carpet. Nana had died just a week before, and the grief still felt like it was caught in my throat, tight and scratchy, hard to swallow but impossible to ignore. I sat curled up on the edge of the couch, clutching the teacup like a lifeline. There's so much to deal with: probate paperwork, her accounts, her will. Every time I think I'm getting ahead, I realize I forgot something. Mom smiled, serene and sympathetic. "That's why we're here, sweetie. Your father and I can help manage things, take the pressure off." She reached out and touched my knee lightly, like she was offering comfort, not control. "We'll call the attorney for you. Look over the asset list together. You don't have to shoulder all of this on your own." I remember the way my shoulders slumped with relief. "Thanks, Mom, that means a lot." Behind her, Dad had been flipping through an old family photo album, Nana in her gardening hat, me as a toddler holding a sunflower bigger than my face. He didn't say much that day, but when I caught his eye, he gave me a rare nod of approval. It felt reassuring. Like maybe, just maybe, they were finally seeing me as an adult. Not the girl who dropped out of med school after 2 years. Not the one who took too long to find her footing, but a woman who was grieving and trying, and who needed support, not judgment. "Your grandmother trusted you with everything she had," Mom said gently, "and I know that responsibility feels heavy right now." I didn't notice the way she said feels heavy, as if the weight was mine, only temporarily. That night, I emailed them digital access to the estate's preliminary documents. mostly because Mom insisted she'd be able to spot anything that looked off. I trusted her. She used to do the PTA books. I mean, she balanced a checkbook better than I ever could. But in truth, I was exhausted. I needed someone in my corner. And who else would I trust, if not my parents? What I didn't know was that even before that living room conversation, they'd already hired an attorney. They had already signed the initial paperwork to pursue conservatorship. That gentle offer of help had been nothing more than theater, well-rehearsed, perfectly timed, and rehearsed in the wings long before I even walked onto the stage. I found out later that they'd started speaking to a law firm 2 days after Nana's funeral. While I was sorting through my grandmother's linens and handwriting thank you cards for condolence flowers, they were outlining their legal strategy. They didn't even have the decency to wait until the estate settled. Sometimes I wonder if I would have noticed sooner if I hadn't been so emotionally fogged. But grief has a way of blinding you to betrayal, especially when it comes gift-wrapped in phrases like, "We just want to help." There was one night I remember clearly, just a week after our talk over tea. I had called my mother to ask if she'd found the appraisal report for Nana's jewelry collection. She'd sounded distracted. "Oh, I gave that to the lawyer," she said. "He's taking care of it." "What lawyer?" I'd asked. There was a pause. "The one you hired, the family one." I hadn't hired anyone yet, but I let it slide. I assumed I'd just forgotten, or that she meant the probate lawyer Nana had used before. Now, looking back, I see the precision, the ease with which they blurred the lines between helpful and harmful. The fact that they didn't need my permission to start, they just needed me too overwhelmed to notice. By the time I did, it was too late. It was almost midnight when I called Trina. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but alert, like she already knew I wouldn't call that late unless something was wrong. "Mandy, what's going on?" I was pacing my apartment barefoot, the hem of my pajama pants dragging over the hardwood. "They did something, I don't know what exactly, but something feels off." A beat of silence, then the sound of rustling as she sat up in bed. "Talk to me." I dropped onto the couch, hugging a throw pillow to my chest like it could anchor me. "Okay, so remember how I told you my parents were helping with the estate stuff?" Trina let out a soft mmHmm, the skeptical kind that usually came with one eyebrow raised. "I think they've been doing more than helping," I said, my voice hollow. "Things aren't adding up. A payment I scheduled never went through. My health insurance randomly changed providers last week. And today, I got a call from my credit card company asking if I authorized a change in mailing address." "Wait, what?" Trina's voice sharpened. "Why would your address be changed? Did you move?" "No, and the weird part is it got updated to my parents' house. Not mine," she exhaled hard. "That's not help, Amanda, that's control." I'd wanted to believe the best. Even as red flags piled up, I told myself it was grief or miscommunication or just my own disorganization. But the more I ignored the signs, the louder they screamed. Trina had seen it all coming. "I don't like this," she said, and I could hear her getting out of bed, probably heading for her kitchen like she always did when a conversation turned serious. "This is like pattern-level shady. The insurance change, the finances, those aren't accidents." I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. Maybe they're just trying to manage things while I get back on my feet. I haven't exactly been the picture of stability lately. "Don't do that," Trina said quickly. "Don't make excuses for people who keep crossing your boundaries. Grief doesn't give them a hall pass to steal your autonomy." Her words landed like a slap and then a hug. She was right, and I hated that she was right. I had wanted to believe that my parents were still the people I grew up with, the ones who packed my lunches and cheered from the bleachers and made French toast on Sundays. But the people I'd trusted my grandmother's legacy to weren't acting out of love. They were moving pieces on a board I didn't even know we were playing. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly. There was a pause, then Trina's voice softened. "Of what?" "That I gave them everything they needed to hurt me, access, trust, control, and now I don't even know what's still mine." "Your voice is still yours," she said, firm and steady. "And your story, that's something they can't rewrite unless you let them." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on documents and passwords and accounts that I hadn't even realized the emotional erosion happening underneath. The subtle messages, the gaslighting, the feeling of shrinking in my own skin. "I feel like I'm disappearing," I whispered. "Like they're carving pieces off me one spreadsheet at a time." Trina didn't try to sugarcoat it. That wasn't her way. She just said, "Then it's time to stop letting them chip away." It's time to get loud. I looked around my apartment, the dim light of my reading lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Nana's framed photo sat on the bookshelf, her smile soft and steady. I think they're trying to make me look incompetent, I said slowly, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I think they're setting something up. Trina's tone changed. Like what? What are you thinking? I don't know exactly, but conservatorship maybe. Or something like that, something legal. Something I won't see coming until it's signed and stamped. The silence on the line grew heavier. Then you need to get ahead of it, she said finally. Start pulling bank statements. Emails, screenshots, anything and everything. Make copies and don't leave them lying around. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, okay. I mean it, Amanda. This is war. You need to build a defense. I glanced back at Nana's photo, her eyes crinkled in that way they always did when she laughed. She'd trusted me with everything, and I wasn't going to let them dismantle that legacy. Tomorrow, I said, tomorrow I start digging. Trina exhaled into the phone. And Amanda, yeah, you're not alone in this either. I'm with you, all the way. I didn't say anything for a moment. My throat was too tight, but in that stillness something shifted, something hardened. Maybe I hadn't seen the betrayal coming, but I wasn't going to sit back and watch it unfold. It was supposed to be a throwaway moment. I was digging through my email spam folder, hunting for a missing e-receipt from a skincare order when I noticed it. A subject line I didn't recognize. Your joint account permissions have been updated. I stared at it, puzzled. I didn't have a joint account. I clicked. The message was from my bank, legit, not a phishing scam, and it confirmed changes to an online account I hadn't touched in weeks. Someone had updated the secondary contact email address and reset the account permissions. The new email was my mother's, her full name, her personal Gmail. A cold wave passed through me, washing out every thought but one there in my accounts. I bolted upright, spilling cold tea across my sweatpants. Nana's estate had 3 separate accounts, 2 savings, 1 checking. All were digital, all were private, and all were supposed to be under my sole authority. My hands were already moving. I logged into the bank portal, heart pounding as I navigated through the security screens. The main dashboard loaded, and I saw the balances, still intact at least for now. But then I found the audit log. I hadn't even known it existed until that moment, tucked away behind 3 tabs and a drop-down menu labeled Activity History. And when I opened it, everything changed. There were logins from devices I didn't recognize, times I hadn't accessed the account. A few days after the estate was transferred to my name, someone had added my mother's email as a recovery option. Then there were changes to security questions, login credentials, even the listed beneficiary on one account. I didn't breathe, I just stared. And then I whispered it out loud, like saying it could make it less real. They've been inside everything. The pit in my stomach turned to steel. I opened a Word doc and began copying the audit log page by page, taking screenshots for good measure. I saved them to both a flash drive and a hidden cloud folder under a nondescript file name, something boring like Tax Receipts 2021. I was shaking, but my fingers flew with purpose. Everything up until now had been suspicion. Red flags, gut feelings. But this was proof. No more wondering. No more benefit of the doubt. I had just found my smoking gun. The next morning, Trina met me at our favorite coffee shop, the one with lavender lattes and acoustic playlists that usually calmed my nerves. Not today. I slid my laptop across the table, spinning it toward her. Look, her eyes scanned the audit trail, the timestamps, the changes, the unauthorized additions. Trina's jaw clenched. They didn't even try to hide it. They really think I'm not paying attention, I muttered. They think I'm too overwhelmed, too weak, too whatever to notice. Trina leaned forward, her tone low and fierce. Then we make them regret that underestimation. You go to a lawyer, immediately. I don't even know where to start, I admitted. Do I file a police report, call the bank? What if they already moved money and I just haven't seen it yet? Trina pulled her phone out. I'm texting you someone. Jackson Rivera. He's a lawyer, used to be a prosecutor. He's helped my cousin with a fraud case last year. He doesn't scare easy, and he hates this kind of power play. I looked at her, surprised. You're sure? He's a bulldog in a 3-piece suit, she said, and he doesn't lose. I saved the number and slid my laptop back into my bag. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than dread. It wasn't joy or relief. Not yet, but it was the beginning of a fight. And this time I had ammo, The office didn't look like the kind of place where battles were fought. It was too quiet, too polished. Dark wood paneling. Art that whispered, "I bill $500 an hour," without saying a word. But as I sat across from Jackson Rivera, I realized this was exactly where my war began. He skimmed through the audit logs I'd printed, nodding every so often, his expression unreadable. His office was neat but lived in. A framed diploma from UCLA Law. A photo of a black Labrador with a red bow tie. A clock that ticked loud enough to compete with the thud of my heart. "Tell me again how your parents got access," he said without looking up. "I sent them some files about the estate, that was it. I never gave them passwords or authorization." "And the estate's funds are solely in your name?" he asked. "Yes," I said, steady now. "Everything was transferred after my grandmother's death. I'm the named beneficiary and I was appointed executor. They were never supposed to touch anything." He finally looked up. "But they did," I nodded. "Without permission. Multiple times." Jackson tapped the printouts with a pen. "What they've done could qualify as fraud, unauthorized access, and potentially elder abuse, if they influenced your grandmother's will, which we'll get to. But first, we protect the assets." He turned to his assistant, who'd been silently typing beside him. "Draft a motion to freeze all accounts associated with the Matthews estate, effective immediately." I stared at him. "We can do that." "You have to do that," he replied. "Before they do something worse." He reached for a thick binder, already labeled with my name. "And we'll file a counterclaim. Conservatorship or not, what they've done is textbook coercion. We'll lay it out for the judge in chronological order: emails, logins, false claims of instability, everything." My eyes drifted to the window. Downtown Phoenix buzzed below us, unbothered. But inside that room, my life was shifting. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the truth and the power they thought I wouldn't fight for. Jackson leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You know why they're doing this, right?" I looked at him, the lump rising in my throat again. "Because they don't trust me." "No," he said. "Because they do trust you, to let them, to not push back, to keep doubting yourself while they take everything." That hit harder than I expected. For years, I'd given my parents the benefit of the doubt. When they criticized, I adjusted. When they overstepped, I apologized. Even now, with cold evidence in my hands, I still second-guessed my anger. But something was shifting, something had to. Jackson passed me a pen. "Sign here to authorize the freeze. Once the court reviews the audit log, we'll file our motion. It'll trigger a mandatory hearing." I stared at the paper. One signature. That's all it took to say, "I don't consent to being erased." I signed. He offered a small nod of approval. "Now we let the paperwork talk." As I stood to leave, his assistant handed me a neatly stapled packet, an itemized list of what I'd filed so far, a timeline of next steps, and a blank folder for any new evidence. "Build your case like it's a puzzle," she said with a warm smile. "Every screenshot, every voicemail, every passive-aggressive email, put it in here." I tucked it under my arm, nodding. "Thank you." Outside, the Arizona sun hit hard, but I didn't flinch. Not anymore. This time, I wasn't walking away in shock. I was walking back into the fire with proof in one hand and a plan in the other. Back home, my one-bedroom apartment no longer felt like just a place to sleep. It had become something else entirely. A command center. A war room. A quiet, stubborn fortress of my own. I cleared the kitchen table, pushing aside old mail and half-burned candles. Then I laid out the new folder Jackson's assistant had given me, along with a second one I labeled in thick black Sharpie, evidence. First came the emails. I'd never been someone who deleted much, which turned out to be a blessing. I combed through months of correspondence with my mother and father. It was subtle, the way they framed their help, like I was fragile, incapable, in over my head. One subject line read, "Let us handle this, it's too much right now." Another, "Don't stress yourself with legalese. We'll take care of it." That one had come 2 days after Nana's estate was officially transferred to my name. I printed each of them, highlighting key lines, trying to keep my hands steady. Then I opened my voicemail app and started from the top. Most were typical reminders, check-ins, an occasional guilt trip disguised as concern. But then I hit that message. The one I hadn't been able to erase, even when I first heard it weeks ago. "You're not capable of protecting what Nana left you. Let us do it." It was my mother's voice. Calm, condescending, like a teacher scolding a child. I played it again, letting the words settle. Then I renamed the file on my desktop. Exhibit A. Her words echoed in the still apartment. You're not capable, my hands tightened around the mouse. Funny how people will talk to you like you're fragile, right before they steal everything from you. I added the voicemail to a USB drive, then backed it up on cloud storage, just like Jackson had instructed. I wasn't taking any chances. The rest of the night passed in quiet focus. I pulled old bank statements, flagged strange transactions, little things I hadn't noticed before, like the $74.32 withdrawal on a Sunday at a gas station 2 cities away, or the email confirming a wire transfer from the estate account that I never authorized. Every page told a story. Every line item whispered, "You trusted the wrong people." By midnight, my apartment looked like a detective's hideout. Paperwork stacked in labeled piles. Post-its framing my monitor. Digital copies syncing to folders named things like Stage 1 Discovery and Inheritance Fraud Timeline. Somewhere in the chaos, I found clarity. They had underestimated me. All this time, they thought I'd drown in grief and retreat like I always had, quiet, obedient, alone. But I wasn't 16 anymore. I wasn't afraid of disappointing them. I was afraid of losing me. And that fear had finally turned into something else, momentum. As I closed my laptop, I glanced again at Nana's picture on the bookshelf. She'd always told me I had her backbone. I used to laugh at that, thinking she meant I was stubborn. Now I knew she meant this, standing alone when you have to, even if it hurts. I whispered to the photo, "You're not taking this from me." The call came at 12:17 a.m. I was half asleep on the couch, surrounded by files and open folders, a pen still in my hand. When I saw Jackson's name flash across the screen, I sat up fast, instantly awake. "Jackson," I answered, voice raspy. "Is everything okay?" He didn't start with pleasantries. "Leonard Holmes just sent us something, anonymously," I blinked. "Leonard, as in my parents' lawyer?" "Yes," Jackson said slowly. "And it looks like he's having second thoughts about representing them, or at least about what they're hiding." I stood, heart pounding, grabbing my laptop. "What did he send?" Jackson's voice dropped. "An internal email chain between your parents. It was likely meant to stay confidential, but someone either made a mistake or decided they've seen enough. He sent it to my email while we spoke." My fingers trembled as I refreshed my inbox. Subject line, FW, Ray, Amanda's situation, strategy discussion. The first email was from my father. The timestamp was 2 weeks before they filed for conservatorship. From Daniel Matthews to Eleanor Matthews, she's too emotional to notice anything. We need to finish this before she gets curious. If we play it right, we'll get everything, she'll be left with nothing, and she won't even see it coming. The air drained from my lungs. Everything I'd suspected, confirmed in 10 lines. Jackson was still talking, calm and methodical. "We're preparing a supplementary motion to include this in our fraud filing. The language is aggressive, unfiltered. It's not just about control, it's about removing you entirely." I read the next few messages. My mother's reply was cold and clipped. "Then we go for full conservatorship. The more incapable she appears, the easier it gets." I couldn't feel my hands. "Are you okay?" Jackson asked, a rare note of concern in his voice. I swallowed. "I will be." I forced myself to read the entire thread. The final email in the chain was short, sent by my father late at night. "She won't fight, she never does." My breath caught. "I'm going to prove him wrong," I said quietly. "They think I'll roll over like always, but they don't know what I've been building." Jackson let out a tight breath. "Good, because now we bring it all to light." He outlined next steps. The new evidence meant the court could fast-track a hearing, and we had more than enough grounds to accuse them of intentional deception, premeditated fraud, and coercion. I didn't cry. Not then. There was no room for tears, just clarity. They hadn't just tried to manipulate the legal system, they'd conspired to erase me. Financially, legally, personally. But Leonard, someone who had been helping them, had blinked. Maybe he didn't want his name attached to what he now knew was a lie. Maybe he had a conscience, or maybe he just didn't want to lose his license. Either way, I now had the thing they never thought I'd get, their plan, in their own words. After we hung up, I opened the emails again. I needed to feel them, burn them into my memory. And when I got to that final line, "She won't fight," I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it, "She Will." The knock came just after sunrise. I was still in leggings and a hoodie, sipping lukewarm coffee at the kitchen table when I opened the door to a man in a gray courier uniform holding a stiff white envelope. "Delivery for Amanda Matthews." he said with a professional nod. I signed without thinking, the familiar coil of anxiety already tightening in my stomach. Legal envelopes had become a routine part of my mornings lately. But this one felt different, thicker, heavier, like it was trying to hide something. I slid my finger under the seal, opened it, and found 3 copies of a document titled, Financial Power of Attorney Amanda Matthews Voluntary Transfer of Asset Control. The heading alone made my hands go numb. I flipped to the second page and froze. My signature was there, only it was close. Neat, even the loop on the A looked like mine. But the date, wrong, the handwriting in the witness field, a stranger's, and the notary stamp. A blurry imprint with a name I didn't recognize. I lowered the pages slowly like they might burn if I dropped them. That's not my signature, I whispered aloud, voice cracking on the words. I'd never seen this document before, never signed it, never would have. Within an hour I was in Jackson's office, the papers laid out neatly between us. His expression had gone from focused to grim. They're doubling down, he muttered. With forgeries. He didn't say it, but I saw the tension in his jaw. This was no longer just a desperate power grab. This was calculated, aggressive, criminal. They want to prove to the court that I willingly handed over control, I said, voice low. To make it look like I changed my mind, gave everything to them, and now I'm backpedaling. Jackson nodded. Exactly. They're building a narrative that you're unstable, impulsive, and that you're lying to cover a mistake. He pushed the documents aside and reached for a legal pad. We'll bring in a handwriting analyst. Subpoena the notary records. If this stamp is real, someone committed perjury. What if the judge believes them? I asked, hating how small I sounded. Jackson met my gaze. Then we tear it apart line by line, but I doubt it will come to that. Your audit logs, emails, the voicemail, the leaked internal thread, that already paints a pattern. These fakes only make it worse for them. He was right. Still, as I left his office that morning, my confidence felt frayed. Forging my signature. That wasn't just betrayal. That was erasure. They were trying to turn me into someone else on paper. Someone helpless. Someone absent. They were building a version of me that didn't exist, hoping the courts would believe that Amanda, compliant, confused, willing to give it all away, was real. But I was done being rewritten. Back home, I laid the forged documents on the kitchen counter and took photos from every angle. Jackson had asked me to start a timeline showing my signature over the years, on leases, on ID cards, on contracts. Anything that could prove a pattern. I dug through every drawer, every box. Old tax returns, my college rental agreement, even a happy 30th birthday card from Trina, where I'd written a long, emotional thank you and signed it in my typical, slightly slanted script. I compared them one by one, and with each real signature, I felt myself coming back. These weren't just pieces of paper. They were pieces of me, and I wasn't going to let anyone forge my future. I was scanning through a week-old voicemail transcription when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize, area code 206. At this point, I barely trusted unknown numbers, but something in my gut told me to answer. Hello, I said cautiously. A pause, then, Amanda, it's Rachel, your Aunt Rachel. I stood up slowly, my mind trying to place the voice. My mother's older sister, the one who moved to Seattle years ago and hadn't been at a family gathering since I was in high school. I wasn't sure if you'd pick up, she continued, voice softer now. But I've been following what's happening. Your mom and dad, they've gone too far. I sank into a kitchen chair. You've heard, she gave a dry, almost bitter laugh. Honey, your mother calls everyone when she's trying to spin a story, but I know better than to take her word as gospel. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Of all people, Rachel was the last person I expected to hear from. I stayed out of it for a long time, she admitted. Too long. I thought maybe things had changed since we stopped speaking, but I was wrong. Her voice tightened with something like guilt. Amanda, I have something you need. I sat up straighter. What is it? Nana's will, the original handwritten copy, the one Alina told everyone didn't exist. My breath hitched. You have it. She sent me a scanned version months before she passed, said she wanted someone outside the immediate family to have a copy, just in case. I pressed a hand over my heart. What does it say? That everything goes to you, Rachel said clearly. She names you sole beneficiary, not Alina, not Daniel, just you. Tears stung behind my eyes. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I finally exhaled. She said you were the only one who ever really listened to her, Rachel continued. The only one who sat with her when she talked about the old days. She trusted you, Amanda, fully. I didn't know, I whispered. You weren't supposed to, she said gently. Your mom told me to destroy the copy when Nana passed, claimed the lawyer's version would reflect the same wishes, but I didn't trust her, so I kept it. I was silent for a long moment, then I found my voice. Would you be willing to come to court? I wouldn't miss it, she said immediately. I should have stepped in sooner, but I'm here now. Her words felt like a hand reaching into the dark. I hadn't realized how lonely it had felt, fighting this battle with just Jackson and Trina in my corner, how desperately I'd wanted someone inside the family to say, "You're not crazy, you're not wrong." I can fly in next week, Rachel said. Email me the court date, I'll bring the copy with me, and Amanda. Yeah, this isn't just about money, she said. It's about respect. About standing up when people try to rewrite your story. I've lived with that silence for too long, I won't do it again. I wiped my cheeks, smiling through tears. Thank you, Rachel, really. Get some rest, sweetheart, she said. We're just getting started. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence for a while. Then I looked at Nana's photo again, the one I'd kept by the window. She had protected me, not just in words, not just in memory, but in writing. And now I wasn't standing alone. The courthouse smelled like old paper, floor wax, and nerves. Downtown Phoenix shimmered in the morning heat, but inside the marbled corridors of the family court building, the air was sharp with tension. I walked past the security checkpoint, gripping my evidence binder like it was armor. Trina was beside me, calm but alert, her hand occasionally brushing mine in quiet solidarity. Jackson led the way, crisp in a dark suit, jaw set. He didn't speak much as we walked, he didn't need to. The rhythm of his steps said everything. Stay focused, stay ready. As we reached the waiting area outside courtroom 3B, I spotted them. My parents. My mother stood near the bench, her back perfectly straight, adjusting a pearl necklace she wore like a badge of self-righteousness. Her heels clicked every time she shifted her weight, anxious energy disguised as poise. My father was speaking in low tones to Leonard Holmes, their attorney, though something about Leonard's posture felt off. Less confident, more cautious. They really think they've already won, I murmured to Jackson. They're about to find out otherwise, he replied without looking at them. A bailiff called out the docket number. The courtroom was colder than the hallway, both in temperature and mood. Rows of wooden benches stretched behind us, mostly empty except for a few other families waiting for later hearings. Aunt Rachel sat quietly near the back, a manila folder on her lap, her presence like an anchor in a storm. We took our seats at the petitioner's table. Yes, they were the ones petitioning. To take control of my life, my assets, my rights. The judge entered, an older woman with silver hair in a tight bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She nodded at both legal teams and spoke with the practiced calm of someone who'd seen every kind of family war imaginable. This hearing is to determine the necessity and validity of the conservatorship petition filed by Daniel and Alina Matthews against Amanda Matthews. The court will also consider the counterclaims submitted regarding potential fraudulent activity and coercion. I sat up straighter. This was it. Leonard rose first, his voice smooth as he began his opening statement. Your Honor, my clients acted not out of malice, but concern. Their daughter has been under immense emotional strain since the loss of her grandmother, and they believe she has made several financial decisions that warrant the court's intervention for her own protection. My mother kept her gaze locked forward, hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked the part of the composed, caring mother. But I knew the truth hiding behind that controlled facade. My father sat as if he owned the courtroom. As Leonard continued, I glanced at Jackson. He made small notes in the margins of our outline, perfectly calm, but I could see it in the slight tapping of his pen. He was waiting for the moment we flipped the script. When Leonard finished, the judge looked over her glasses. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Defense may proceed. Jackson stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked a slow, deliberate circle around the table before beginning. Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of concern but control, not protection but premeditation. He paused, then held up a stapled packet. This audit log from the plaintiff's daughter's bank account shows a pattern of unauthorized access dating back months before any petition was filed. The changes were made without consent, by Alina Matthews. My mother's neck stiffened. Jackson set the packet on the evidence table and continued. We also have documentation of forged power of attorney forms, submitted after the initial court filing, an attempt to create the illusion that Ms. Matthews willingly gave up her rights. The judge leaned forward slightly. And finally, he said, gesturing toward the gallery, we have a key witness prepared to testify with a previously undisclosed copy of the decedent's original will, one that names Amanda Matthews as sole beneficiary. This version directly contradicts the plaintiff's prior statements under oath. He let the weight of that settle, then calmly returned to his seat. The judge took a slow breath. This court will now review preliminary evidence before calling the first witness. She looked between both tables. Her face was unreadable, but the shift in the air was unmistakable. The power had moved, no longer held in my mother's pearls or my father's smug silence. Now it rested in the truth. In documents, recordings, testimonies. In me. The second day of the hearing opened with a storm brewing in silence. From my seat at the defense table, I could see it in the judge's posture, upright, attentive, and slightly tense, as she flipped through the new documents handed over that morning. Jackson had submitted Leonard's leaked email chain just minutes before the session began, with a note requesting the court to consider them as supplementary evidence. My mother sat in her usual stiff poise, hands clasped like a churchgoer, her pearl necklace resting lightly above her collarbone. My father whispered something to Leonard, who barely nodded, his face drained of its usual courtroom confidence. They could feel it. Something was unraveling. Calling to review Document D in evidence, the judge announced, flipping to a flagged page in the binder. That was the forgery. The false power of attorney they delivered by courier, the one with the forged signature, the fake notary stamp, the lies written in neat print. The judge stared at it for several seconds. Then she raised her gaze over her glasses. This signature, she said slowly, doesn't match. A ripple of movement passed through the courtroom. I felt it in my chest like a held breath finally let go. Ms. Matthews, the judge said, turning toward me, have you ever signed this document? No, Your Honor, I said clearly. That is not my signature. Do you recognize the notary listed here? No, ma'am, Jackson stood. If the court will allow, we've included verified samples of Ms. Matthews' signature across multiple official documents over the last 7 years, and we have contacted the Secretary of State's office regarding the notary listed. There's no record of them being licensed in Arizona. The judge turned to the court clerk. Pull up the signature comparison packet, please. Within moments, the samples appeared on the courtroom monitor. My real signature fluid, slightly slanted, next to the stiff, too-perfect version on Document D. The judge leaned forward, studied, then her jaw set. She turned to Leonard. Mr. Holmes, are you prepared to explain the source of this document? Leonard stood, his voice hesitant. Your Honor, I was not involved in producing this specific document. It was submitted to my office by my clients directly. And did you verify its authenticity before attaching it to the case file? I did not, he admitted. I have recently become aware of discrepancies and have distanced myself from certain actions in this matter. A heavy silence fell. Then came the voice I didn't expect, my mother. This is absurd, she said, standing suddenly. Her voice cracked, high-pitched and trembling. It's her word against ours. She's unstable. She's emotional. She doesn't even understand what she's saying. The judge's eyes narrowed. Sit down, Mrs. Matthews, but she didn't. She's always been like this, my mother shouted. Always dramatic, always looking for someone to blame. Then my father rose too, adding in his cold, dismissive tone, we did what was necessary. We didn't think she'd actually fight us. Those words stopped everything. The judge closed the binder with a sharp thud. Security, she said, her voice suddenly louder. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Matthews from the courtroom. My mother froze mid-sentence. Excuse me, she gasped. We're the petitioners. You are also under immediate investigation for potential forgery, fraud, and perjury, the judge replied. You may speak through your counsel going forward. 2 officers entered quietly from the side door. One gestured toward the back exit. My mother backed away as if they'd struck her. You can't do this, she hissed. You have no idea what she's capable of. She manipulated all of this. I suggest you remain silent, Leonard muttered to her, low but audible. My father didn't say a word as he followed them out, jaw clenched and face pale. I didn't move. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just watched, steady and still, as the two people who had spent months trying to dismantle me were escorted out by the very system they'd tried to manipulate. And then the judge turned to me. "Ms. Matthews, we will reconvene at a later date to finalize the dismissal of the conservatorship petition and begin review of your counterclaims." I nodded once, throat tight. Aunt Rachel leaned forward behind me and whispered, "That, sweetheart, is what justice looks like." That evening, the sky over Phoenix melted into watercolor streaks, peach, rose, and indigo, fading into the quiet hush of desert dusk. I sat on the rooftop of my apartment building, legs tucked beneath me, a bottle of chilled rosé between me and Trina. A breeze lifted the hem of my dress as the city lights blinked on below us, one by one. For the first time in months, I wasn't checking my phone. I wasn't reading court filings or cross-referencing logins. I was breathing. "I still can't believe they tried to forge your name," Trina said, pouring us each a glass. "They actually thought they could gaslight you out of your own legacy." "They really thought silence meant weakness," I murmured, tracing the rim of the glass with one finger. "That if they moved fast and loud enough, I'd collapse before I asked the right questions. But you didn't." Trina turned to me, a grin playing on her lips. "You turned every trap they laid into a piece of evidence. Honestly, it was poetic." I laughed, soft and genuine. "I don't know if it was poetic, it was a mess, but it was mine." Clinked glasses gently, letting the moment sit in the air between us. Downstairs, the world went on, cars passing, neighbors returning home, life continuing like nothing monumental had shifted. But up here on this rooftop, I was untangling myself from the weight of months of betrayal. "I keep thinking about that moment," I said quietly. "When the judge called security, my mom, she didn't even look at me, not once. She looked at the judge, at the officers, at Leonard, but never at me." "Because she knew," Trina replied. "Looking at you meant acknowledging what she did, and some people just can't handle their own reflection when it's held up with honesty." I swirled the wine in my glass. "I didn't want this, not the fight, not the war. I just wanted to be trusted, to be treated like an adult, like I mattered." "You do matter," she said, without hesitation. "And now, the world knows it too." We sat in silence for a while, the city humming beneath us. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and opened the file folder labeled "She Will." Inside were every screenshot, document, and audio file that had carried me through the fight. But now I tapped Select All and moved them into a new folder, closed, not deleted, just done. "They lost more than the case," I said softly. "They lost access to me." Trina raised her glass again. "To peace, and to choosing yourself," I smiled. "To Nana, for giving me the tools to fight, even when she wasn't here." We drank in silence after that, letting the air cool and the sun slip entirely behind the mountains. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel scrutinized or judged or second-guessed. I felt free. 1 year later, I stood behind a podium, facing a room full of strangers who in some way already knew me. The hotel ballroom was warm and softly lit, rows of women seated in quiet attention. Some were business owners, some students. Some still figuring out how to call what happened to them by its true name. I took a breath, not out of nerves but out of reverence for the moment. "My name is Amanda Matthews," I began, my voice steady, "and a year ago I learned that the greatest betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people who raised you." No one shifted. No one looked away. I continued, "This workshop is called Protecting Yourself from Family Financial Abuse. But let me tell you, what we're really talking about is reclaiming power, reclaiming voice, reclaiming what's yours when the people closest to you try to convince you it never was." Afterward, as the session ended and applause filled the room, a woman in her 50s approached me. Her makeup was fresh, but her eyes were tired, brimming with something unspoken. She wrapped me in a hug before I could even offer my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "You helped me find the courage to speak up. I didn't even know what to call what was happening until I heard your story." I squeezed her hand. "You're not alone, you never were, you just needed the right mirror." She nodded, then disappeared into the crowd, but her presence stayed with me, heavy and meaningful. Later, I stepped outside to the hotel terrace, overlooking the downtown lights. The Arizona air was cool again, winter just brushing the desert. Trina had texted earlier, something about a ridiculous cake she was baking to celebrate my first national speaking engagement. Aunt Rachel had mailed me a framed copy of Nana's original will, newly notarized with a sticky note, "Justice in writing." I held the railing and looked up at the stars. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore, not about the forged signatures, the court hearings, the look on my mother's face when the judge ordered her out of the courtroom. I was thinking about something softer, more enduring, resilience, the kind you don't even know you have until someone tries to erase you, the kind that lives in quiet places, in whispered truths, in folders named She Will, in friends who stay up late just to listen, in a grandmother who signs your name into a legacy because she believes you'll protect it. I hadn't lost my dignity. It had just been buried, beneath silence, guilt, gaslighting. But now it lived on a stage, in a voice that shook walls, in a room full of women finding the words for what happened to them. And no one, not even the people who gave me life, could take it from me again. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to stand up to someone who was supposed to protect you? I'm reading every word.